Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I am going to make another set of tags using the Not Too Shabby Shop December subscription box of the month. So in my earlier video, I actually used one of the 6x6 paper pads as the color scheme for my tags, and I colored my little critters to match those papers. And I'll do the same in this video as well. However, in that first video, I focused more on how I made the tags, and in this video, I'll actually focus more on the coloring. And if you want to see how I make my tags, these are the exact same shape tags. I make them in the exact same way as that first video. So if you want to go back and check out that video, then you'll see more of that process of making these tags. So with this set, I thought it would be really fun. And I had made the comment in reply to a viewer who watched the first video that it might be fun to actually make another set of tags, but using the Fawns in Winter paper pad, because the two paper pads are just so very different in color, color scheme and the feel. One feels very wintry and just very cozy and almost woodsy, and the other one feels more bright, a little bit more cheerful, and so lots of fun. I'm really glad that we have the two to choose from because they are so different. With the first set of tags, I actually colored with alcohol markers, but here I'm actually going to color with my water-based markers, which I also have set from Ohuhu. I say also because my alcohol markers are Ohuhu as well. And the way that I'm coloring is I want to keep these colored images fairly monochromatic. So what I'm doing is I actually scribbled the watercolor marker right onto my acrylic block, and I'm using a water brush pen. There is water in this pen, but I actually just squeezed out a little bit of water onto my acrylic block also, and I'm using that water as opposed to squeezing water out of my pen because I feel like I can control how much water I'm using a lot easier that way. And what I'll do is I'll mix that water into a little bit of that pigment that I have scribbled onto my acrylic block. And the more water you add, the more diluted the color is. And so just with one color, you can go from light to dark. I'm coloring onto just plain old cardstock. So ideally you would want to be doing this onto some watercolor paper because watercolor paper is designed to absorb a lot of water without bleeding, without the paper pilling and warping quite as much as just a plain old cardstock would. So if you're going to do what I'm doing, and if you're going to color onto cardstock, what I would recommend is don't use a lot of water and be patient and allow for your watercoloring to dry before going over it in a second or a third time. Because if you're tempted to just keep on going over the same area that's already wet, your paper is gonna get soggy and might start pilling, and that may not be the intended look that you want to go for. So that would be my suggestion, especially since it is nice to go back over some areas and darken some areas just so that you build up that contrast, which will make your critters look a little bit more dimensional, and you can still do that with just one or two colors. So for the two blue critters, I've used blue, but then I also scribbled on some gray, and the gray helps to create a shade of that blue so that it's a little bit darker. And for this bear, I've just picked two shades of brown, and one that's a little bit of a warmer brown and the other is a little bit of a cooler brown, and then a little bit of black. And again, the black I'm using just to make the browns a little bit darker so that it's the same tone but just darkened, so that I can use that in the shadow areas. And so you can see not a lot of colors, but you can definitely still kind of get a lot of color variation just by controlling how much water you use. And then, you know, using something like a dark gray or a black to create a shade of whatever your primary color is, and that way you can use that as your shadows instead of just going straight in with black, which might be a little too dark. Just adding a little bit of that black to whatever color you're using, or adding a little bit of gray to whatever color you're using, is a great way to kind of deepen the colors a little bit. And for the patterns, so with this particular image, I thought it was a lot of fun to still stay restrictive in that monochromatic feel. And what I did was I tried to vary from dark to light, where there would be some strips going across that would be more towards the dark end, and then some patterns, some of the horizontal patterns, for example here, I'm using one of the lighter browns, one of the warmer browns. And so that's how I was able, still using I think I only used 3 colors on this bear, but there's still a lot of highlight and shadow. The pattern on the sweater and the scarf still looks kind of interesting. It doesn't look like it's all one flat color, and it still looks like it's got some shadows, and where the bulge is in the front, where the belly is, it's a little bit lighter, where off to the left and the right, it's a little bit darker, so that gives that more rounded look. And so I thought this was a lot of fun. It just goes to show that you don't really need a ton of colors to get a lot of color variation. And when everything dries, it will dry a little bit lighter than when you color it initially. So if you want to deepen or darken those colors a little, you can always let everything dry, or take a heat gun to it if you don't want to wait. I would be gentle because you might warp your paper. My paper's warped a little bit because I did take a heat gun to it. So it'll curl a little bit. One thing that you could do is you can apply your heat gun to both the top side and the underside, and that might help even out the warping. But ideally, if I had known in advance that I was going to be using watercolors, I would have just stamped these onto watercolor paper. But I stamped these images out weeks ago and wanted to still use them. So it's not to say that you can't use regular cardstock, just you have to take some extra precautions when you're doing that. So here's a final look at the 4 tags that I created, and I love them all. I just love how different these critters look, and this box has just been so much fun to craft with. Thanks so much. Until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.